Wholesome support 30 plus years later, by user TDLMTH. I put this in a comment on another post, but I think it deserves a post of its own. 1990, the waning era of DOS and diskettes. I had a university classmate whose 3.5 diskette gave up the ghost a month or so before his fourth-year thesis was due. He had no backup. I was known as the super geek in my engineering class, so he came to me. The disk was unrecoverable using the usual tools, so I wrote a quick utility to read the raw sectors, and we basically rebuilt his thesis sector by sector. This was at a time when word processors stored their data in uncompressed text, which made rebuilding easier, so an hour or so later he walked away with his thesis, and sanity, intact. We've been friends on Facebook for a few years now, and last year he messaged me with "Do you remember?" and "I never forgot what you did for me." It was a nice feeling. Calculator calling, by user Jolie_. I worked as head of IT in a municipal office, and part of my job description was help desk things. Well, one day a kindergarten called and let me know their smartphones don't work. Not willing to elaborate any further, I thought, welp, I guess I have to drive there and see what's up myself. For context, they had a landline phone for the past few decades and only recently transitioned to smartphones with VoIP so that they don't have to leave the children to take calls. I get there and the older, about 50-ish, lady explained to me that she receives calls and texts, but can't call herself. I try everything out and it works like a charm. So I ask her to show me what she's doing when she wants to call someone. Well, I open the number app and type in the number, proceeds to open the calculator and type in the telephone number. Then I put the phone to my ear, but nothing happens. I calmly explained that this is, indeed, not a landline phone and she needs to use the phone app. Although I can understand the confusion, smartphones have been around since that lady was 30-ish. Welp, 20 minutes drive there and back for nothing, I guess. Edit, fixed spelling mistake. Requiem for an R710, by user Cynicaltruist. A while back I worked a summer for my college professor who also owned a cybersecurity company. It was a good gig, I got experience and he got cheap seasonal labor to answer phones and crunch tickets. Win-win. One of my jobs was processing hardware. He was pulling in tons of hardware for contracts or expansion or other stuff. I would get a ticket, match ticket to hardware, take hardware from point to point, and install/uninstall it. From there, admins used iDRAX to set it up, or whatever the Cisco/HP/Supermicro alphabet soup is. It was a fairly smooth system. One day I start my tickets with a load of R710s. These things were both dirty and pretty beat up. Most worked, but the top one had an error and wouldn't respond on iDRAC. I pull it, and the motherboard is fried, completely cooked. I submit my ticket and move on. It's just another server to me, after all. About 3 hours later I get a visit from the CEO/professor himself. He asks some very particular questions about the R710 that had died, and then when he double-checks my analysis, he agrees it's dead and not worth replacing. He pulls the drives and does the backups himself, then submits the decommissioning ticket for Monday. Monday rolls around, and I walk in to find the office full of business professional dressed people I haven't seen before. These people are all business partners and former employees, and there's even some contract holders in the mix. Most of the employees are there, pre-COVID, and I'm a bit concerned I missed an email or memo or something. Normally a server decommissioning takes a few minutes and there's no fuss or fanfare. Not today. As I wheeled my cart with the dead R710 out into the hallway, the motherfucker plays the bagpipe rendition of Amazing Grace over the PA system, and all these business people line the halls looking both sad and like they're holding in laughter. Before I load the server onto my desk, this wonderfully strange CEO steps up and goes into a full-on eulogy. Gone before its EOL date, a truly kind and gentle processor, and both empathetic and extremely expandable were the highlights I remember, since there I was with a dead server and 20 people all standing around me in a room slightly bigger than my dorm. What I didn't know was that this was the origin. This was the first server his company bought, the first one to serve clients, the one the entire company ran on for years. Its name was Winslow, and it had gone with the CEO to demonstrate his services and win his first multi-million-dollar contract. After this, we were treated to a free-to-us company sushi lunch, and then I got a special order to mount the server on the wall instead of throwing it away. As far as I know, it's still there. TLDR, our CEO had a funeral for a server. It was corny. The Golden Floppy, by user Ateng Einard. Just remembered this one tonight. We're just past the turn of the century, I'm a student admin for a lab on my college campus. My lab tech asks me to pop over from my office to the lab for a user who's having an issue. Her floppy disk won't read, not a true floppy, it's a 3.5 disk, but stay with me here. I try to get it to read myself, no luck. I try ejecting the disk. It pops like an 1/8 of an inch. It won't come out further even when you pull on it. It's stuck. See, we used to have this problem. Our users would put a perfectly good floppy in the drive, and when it popped out for whatever reason it would come out without the metal slide it went in with. And they wouldn't tell a soul. So I grab some pliers and a screwdriver and proceed to remove not 1, not 2, 4 floppy slides out of this drive, including hers. When a drive in our lab started collecting slides, any floppy put in there was left unreadable. Something about the magnets trying to magnet when they're not in the right position has a nasty habit of making your little portable save button no longer functional. No good for the drive, either, they almost never recover from it. But we weren't quite done yet. I still felt like giving it another go, so we walked over into the office area and tried on one of my known good machines. Still no luck. Notable, the user has been pretty relaxed to this point, no stress detected. I'm about ready to give up here and kinda start to tell her we can't get to what's on the disk, but then she just blurts out what's on the disk. Her graduate thesis that she's been working on for 18 months. The one that's due in the next month or two and is almost done. The only copy in existence. You could feel the air suck out of the room in that moment. Deep breath. She's moved straight through the worried stage now and is just standing there crying silently as I'm doing my thing, no pressure. I've got that pit of dread in my stomach knowing just how hosed she is as I performed a digital Hail Mary over the next half hour or so. I can't remember what I did anymore, some repeated mixture of DOS/Windows 98 commands, chkdsk plus some flags and another command that's lost to the years, but. After a couple of tries, it worked. The Word doc loaded. I immediately saved it off to my desktop, her student network drive, and a brand new floppy. Honestly, I might have been more relieved than she was when she walked out. I am certain I never worked harder on any floppy disk problem. That girl was blessed that was the only floppy disk we ever managed to recover that way. Any disk ever put into one of those drives that had started collecting slides I ever worked with other than hers was completely unrecoverable. A fluke occurrence, by user Johnny Miskatinick. In 2019, I worked in hardware support for a company with about 20 locations around our city. There were a handful of primary sites and a bunch of smaller ones. Support teams worked out of the primary sites and visited the secondaries when tickets were opened. One day I got a ticket from a secondary site on the other side of town. Low priority, there's a computer in the storage room that they want moved. Okay, I'll get around to that. Maybe when another ticket takes me over there. Eventually, another ticket took me over there, but I spaced it because I didn't have to go into the back of the house. Because we had gotten our systems mostly nailed down, months could go by without a tech needing to access network cabinets or patch panels, or bother the networking team. This was also good because our networking team was small, overworked and underpaid. There was a lot of turnover on their team. Some of the hardware techs I worked with had been with the company almost 20 years, nobody on the networking team had been there longer than 5. They tended to come and go without the rest of us noticing. This is pertinent. A few weeks later, my manager was going over aging tickets and reminded me of that one. We both figured it was one of the old Dells from before the hardware refresh. I headed across town to the somewhat iffy location, then I walked around until I found the custodian to open up the combination supply closet/server room where all the local networking equipment lived. I looked around fruitlessly for an old computer for a few moments, and then I saw it, sitting on the rung of a ladder next to the boxes of paper cups and floor cleaner. It wasn't a computer, but a tablet. And not just a tablet but a tablet. Specifically, a Fluke Networks OptiView network analysis tablet, probably worth about $10,000 at the time. The charger and the carrying case were on the floor nearby. Apparently one of our networking guys quit and left it there, and it had been sitting in this closet for almost 6 months. I thought about telling my manager, yep, old Optiplex, and taking it to a pawn shop, but I have principles, and also there were security cameras, so I turned it over to him and he returned it to networking, and we never heard another thing about how they had managed to overlook a missing $10,000 piece of equipment for half a year.